Spider-Man has faced some of the most iconic villains in comic book movie history, but across 20 years of films, each era created a completely different style of enemy. Green Goblin, Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn was the wealthy founder and CEO of Oscorp, and a father figure Peter Parker admired long before he knew Spider-Man. After being pressured by military contracts and the threat of losing his company to rival corporate interests, Norman secretly tested an unstable super soldier performance serum on himself. The serum enhanced his strength, reflexes, and intelligence, but at the cost of his sanity. A split personality emerges, transforming him into the Green Goblin. Norman becomes obsessed with proving dominance over New York, seeing the world as a battlefield where only the strongest deserve to survive. He targets Spider-Man specifically because Peter represents everything Norman envies: genuine talent, moral restraint, and admiration from the public that Norman believes should have been his. Norman also discovers Peter's identity, ultimately turning the conflict personal, even kidnapping Mary Jane. His final attempt to impale Peter backfires, and he's killed by his own glider, a death caused, symbolically, by the very arrogance and aggression that created him.
Oh. Don't tell Harry.
Dr. Octopus, Otto Octavius. Dr. Otto Octavius was one of the most respected scientific minds in New York, admired for his brilliance in nuclear fusion energy research. With funding from Oscorp, Otto developed a groundbreaking experiment that aimed to create a miniature self-sustaining sun using tritium. To safely control the reactor during activation, he engineered 4 mechanical tentacle arms, each equipped with advanced AI and directly connected to his nervous system through a neural harness. During the demonstration, the fusion reaction spiraled out of control. The resulting explosion killed his wife Rosalie and destroyed the inhibitor chip that kept the tentacles from influencing his brain, which left the arms permanently fused to his spine. With his emotions shattered and the arm's artificial intelligence now overriding his judgment, Otto became increasingly fixated on completing his experiment. He began stealing money, equipment, and rare tritium supplies, while regarding Spider-Man as the only real obstacle blocking his progress. Otto's worldview becomes singular. Achieving the power of the sun is worth any consequence, even mass destruction. In a final confrontation near the East River, Peter Parker unmasks himself to Otto and appeals to the man he used to be.
You once spoke to me about intelligence to be used for the good of mankind.
Reminding him of Rosalie. Otto regains control of his mind, rejects the influence of the arms, and deliberately sacrifices himself, sinking the new reactor to the bottom of the river before it detonates. Sandman, Flint Marko. Flint Marko was a struggling criminal who turned to robbery as a way to pay for medical treatment for his young, terminally ill daughter. After escaping from custody, he accidentally stumbles into a particle physics experiment at a research facility. The machine tears apart and rebonds his body with sand at a molecular level, allowing him to transform his mass, shapeshift, harden into stone-like density, and grow to enormous sizes. Unlike most villains in the Raimi universe, Sandman isn't driven by greed or ego. He's driven by love for his child and guilt for his past mistakes. His conflict with Spider-Man intensifies when Peter believes Flint was responsible for Uncle Ben's death. Only later is it revealed that the shooting was an accidental discharge, not intentional murder. When Flint explains the truth in his remorse, Peter forgives him.
I forgive you.
Sandman drifts away into the wind, leaving his fate unknown, one of the few villains who isn't killed or imprisoned. Venom, Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock was a freelance photographer competing directly with Peter Parker for work at the Daily Bugle. Desperate to rise quickly and make a name for himself, Eddie faked evidence to discredit Spider-Man, only to be publicly exposed by Peter. Losing his job, reputation, and future, Eddie spirals into rage and humiliation. In this state of emotional collapse, a parasitic alien symbiote, which had previously bonded with Peter, merges with Eddie, amplifying his hatred and granting him the powers of the symbiote's previous host. The symbiote turns Eddie into Venom, a creature with many of Spider-Man's abilities but none of Peter's restraint. Venom joins forces with Sandman to kill Peter, kidnapping Mary Jane and using Spider-Man's personal life as leverage. Ultimately, Peter uses sonic vibrations to separate Eddie from the symbiote. In his desperation not to return to being ordinary and powerless, Eddie dives back into the symbiote's mass and is killed when the fragments explode. New Goblin, Harry Osborn. Harry Osborn's path to villainy is deeply personal. After discovering Spider-Man was present when his father Norman died, Harry becomes convinced that Peter murdered him. Blinded by grief and betrayal, he injects himself with a variant of the Goblin formula and upgrades his father's equipment with advanced mobility tech, becoming the New Goblin. Harry's sole mission becomes one of revenge, targeting Peter emotionally and physically and nearly killing him in their early confrontations. Over time, Harry learns the truth about Norman's death, finally hearing the real story from his butler and realizing his father died by his own hand as the Green Goblin. This shatters his entire worldview.
The blade that pierced his body came from his glider.
In the final battle of the trilogy, Harry chooses loyalty over vengeance, teaming with Peter to save Mary Jane and stop Venom and Sandman. Harry dies protecting Peter, completing the tragic Osborn family arc that began in the very first film. The Amazing Spider-Man villains. The Lizard, Dr. Curt Connors. Dr. Curt Connors was a leading Oscorp scientist specializing in cross-species genetics, driven by the belief that human DNA could be repaired or enhanced through animal-based regenerative traits. Personally, his motivation stemmed from losing his right arm, a constant reminder of what he considered human biological limitations. Connors was working on a serum using reptilian DNA, hoping to regenerate lost limbs. After testing the formula on himself, his arm grew back, but the serum mutated him into a giant reptilian creature known as the Lizard. As the Lizard, Connors' mindset shifts into a predatory, superior worldview. He believes humanity is flawed because of its weaknesses, and that forced evolution is the only future. Instead of curing disability, the Lizard seeks to fix the entire human race by transforming them into hybrid creatures like himself. Spider-Man eventually stops Connors' plan and reverses the serum's effects, returning him to his human state. Despite his actions, Connors retains sympathy from Peter, who understands his intent began as genuine scientific hope, not malicious conquest. Electro, Max Dillon. Max Dillon was an overlooked electrical engineer at Oscorp, lonely, socially invisible, and constantly pushed aside. His life changed when he suffered a workplace accident and was electrocuted by genetically modified electric eels inside one of Oscorp's testing vats. The mutation caused his nervous system to convert directly into pure electrical energy, making Max capable of absorbing, generating, and discharging vast voltage. However, his psychological instability was amplified along with his power. Electro's identity crisis becomes the core of his villainy. Before transforming, Max simply wanted to be noticed. After transforming, he becomes addicted to the attention and fear he commands. What began as a desperate need for acknowledgement turns into an obsession with power and dominance. Spider-Man, who once showed kindness to Max, becomes the target of his anger when Max believes Peter betrayed him. In battle, Spider-Man successfully overloads and disables Electro, ending his threat. Max stands as one of the most tragic examples of a lonely man weaponized by circumstance, someone who was ignored until the day he became dangerous. Green Goblin, Harry Osborn. Harry Osborn returns to New York in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 after spending years away from his father, Norman Osborn. Upon Norman's death, Harry inherits both Oscorp and the genetic illness that killed his father, a rare degenerative condition slowly breaking down his body. Desperate for a cure and convinced that Spider-Man's blood might save him,
"It'll save my life." It may not, Harry.
Harry turns to increasingly dangerous measures. When Peter refuses to give him his blood, afraid the mutation could be fatal, Harry's desperation turns into anger and betrayal. After being ousted from Oscorp by its board, Harry infiltrates the company's secret biogenetic projects and injects himself with an experimental formula derived from genetically modified spiders. The serum mutates him violently, accelerating his illness and transforming him into a twisted, deformed version of the Green Goblin. With access to Oscorp's advanced flight armor, Harry fully embraces the Goblin identity, becoming one of the darkest interpretations of the character in Spider-Man film history. Harry's Goblin ultimately becomes responsible for one of the most tragic moments in the franchise: the death of Gwen Stacy during the Clock Tower battle.
Stay with me, stay with me. Stay with me, stay with me. You stay with me.
This event marks the emotional collapse of Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker, shaping the darker, grief-stricken version of Spider-Man he later reveals in No Way Home. Harry is later imprisoned in Ravencroft Institute, where his transformation and crimes leave a permanent scar on his universe's Peter. Rhino, Alexei Sitsevich. Alexei Sitsevich was a violent Russian mob enforcer operating in New York City, known initially for arms trafficking and heavy weapon transport. He is first introduced in a simple ground-level crime chase rather than a massive origin sequence. After being captured and humiliated publicly during one of Spider-Man's early crime-fighting moments, Alexei returns later wearing an experimental exosuit developed from Oscorp technology, transforming himself into the Rhino. The mechanical armor turns him into a living tank, heavily protected, massively strong, and capable of destructive charges. Unlike the other villains of the Amazing Spider-Man era, Rhino has no deeper moral conflict, scientific tragedy, or emotional breakdown. His entire threat comes from brute force and criminal intent. He represents the raw, chaotic street-level criminals that exist in Spider-Man's world. Not masterminds, not tragic figures, but physical threats born from New York's criminal underbelly. MCU Spider-Man villains. The Vulture, Adrian Toomes. Adrian Toomes was the owner of a salvage contracting company hired to clean up alien technology left behind after the Battle of New York. When the U.S. government, through the newly formed Department of Damage Control, suddenly seized the cleanup operation, Toomes lost his contract, equipment, and future income. Feeling betrayed by the system and unwilling to let his family collapse financially, he turned to black market technology smuggling. Using Chitauri scrap and reverse-engineered tech supplied by the Tinkerer, Toomes built a powerful winged exosuit, becoming the Vulture. Unlike most Spider-Man villains, Toomes never cared about global domination. He just wanted to provide for his own family and stay financially afloat. His philosophy is grounded, practical, and built on survival. He becomes a major threat when Spider-Man interferes with his operations, attempting to stop his arms trafficking. In the final confrontation, Toomes' wingsuit malfunctions and explodes, but he survives. Importantly, he later protects Peter's identity while in prison, proving his moral code is twisted but not entirely broken. Shocker, Herman Schultz. Herman Schultz was one of Adrian Toomes' crew members, working as part of the arms smuggling operation that sold weaponry enhanced with alien tech. Schultz operated primarily as an enforcer and field operative. After the first Shocker, Jackson Bryce, and is killed during a disagreement with Toomes, Schultz becomes the second Shocker, inheriting the modified gauntlet weapon that launches concussive blasts strong enough to destroy cars and break concrete. Unlike many villains in the Spider-Man franchise, Shocker isn't a mastermind, scientist, or ideologue. He is a worker. His loyalty is based on his position within Toomes' operation rather than personal hatred for Spider-Man. His role is to enforce, intimidate, and protect the organization's interests. He is ultimately defeated by Spider-Man during Toomes' smuggling collapse, marking the end of his threat. Tinkerer, Phineas Mason. Phineas Mason was the technical expert within Toomes' crew, reverse engineering alien devices into powerful hybrid black market weapons. Using Chitauri components, dark matter energy cores, and salvaged Ultron tech, Mason invented and upgraded equipment used by the criminal network, including the Vulture's flight harness, shock gauntlets, and various weapon prototypes. Mason is the logistical brain behind the operation, the silent engineer whose skill turns scraps into weapons. Unlike Toomes, Mason shows no emotional struggle about criminal work. He views technological smuggling as a practical occupation. His threat level comes not from direct combat, but from enabling dangerous equipment to circulate into the criminal world. When Toomes' operation collapses, Mason disappears into the background, leaving his future unknown. Mysterio, Quentin Beck. Quentin Beck was a former Stark Industries employee who specialized in advanced illusion-driven immersive holographic technology. After Tony Stark dismissed his work as unstable and potentially harmful, Beck became resentful and claimed Stark stole credit for his inventions. Gathering a group of ex-Stark employees who shared similar grudges, Beck weaponized holographic drones, projection tech, and data manipulation systems to create staged hero moments in Europe, presenting himself as a dimension-traveling savior.
This is Earth, Dimension 616. I'm from Earth 833.
His plan was to become Earth's next great superhero figure and claim the fame and recognition he believed he deserved. Beck manipulated Peter, gaining access to Stark's Edith satellite system, technology with global defense capacity. After being exposed during their final confrontation in London, Beck died during his attempt to kill Peter using drone crossfire. However, before his death, he released edited footage publicly revealing Peter's identity, creating the biggest turning point in Holland's trilogy. Scorpion, Mac Gargan. Mac Gargan was a criminal arms buyer involved in the black market weapon deals disrupted by Spider-Man during the ferry incident. Although he does not become the Scorpion in armor during the film, his identity is clearly established as the future Scorpion from the comics. Gargan expresses strong interest in revenge against Spider-Man and is later seen in custody, where he attempts to locate individuals who could help target Peter.
Got some boys on the outside who'd love to meet him.
take a picture, slice his throat, put his head in a dryer.
His brief role sets up long-term narrative potential rather than immediate threat, positioning him as a future villain whose transformation into the Scorpion armor is implied but not yet realized on screen. Prowler, Aaron Davis. Aaron Davis is a small-time criminal operating in New York who silently connects the street-level world to Peter Parker's narrative. Although he is not seen in armor or under the Prowler identity, his character is confirmed in the MCU, and he acknowledges having a nephew in the city.
I don't want those weapons in this neighborhood. I got a nephew who live here.
Which is a direct reference to Miles Morales. Aaron provides Spider-Man with information rather than direct physical threat, and his involvement hints at future connections between the Spider-Man legacy and the eventual arrival of Miles. His presence foreshadows a much larger Spider-Man universe developing off-screen, but in the current era, Aaron Davis remains a narrative seed rather than a full active villain. No Way Home, villain Convergence. In Spider-Man: No Way Home, Doctor Strange's spell, intended to erase the public knowledge of Spider-Man's identity, fractures the multiverse. Instead of reversing the reveal, the spell drags in anyone from alternate universes who knew Peter Parker was Spider-Man. As a result, villains from both the Sam Raimi Trilogy and the Amazing Spider-Man films suddenly appear inside the MCU world. This brings Dr. Octavius, Green Goblin, Sandman, Electro, and Lizard into direct contact with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, each of them pulled from the exact moment before their original deaths or final defeats. For the Raimi villains, this means Otto is taken while still under the control of the tentacles, Norman arrives before being impaled by his glider, and Flint Marko appears mid-Sandman phase. For the Amazing Spider-Man era, Max Dillon arrives in his electrically mutated state, and Kurt Connors emerges still corrupted as the Lizard. Unlike their original timelines, however, the MCU Peter Parker chooses to cure them rather than send them back to die. With stark technology and scientific collaboration between all three Spider-Men, each villain is individually treated. Otto's inhibitor chip is repaired, Norman's goblin personality is suppressed, Electro's power levels are stabilized, and Connor's reptilian mutation is reversed. This results in multiple antagonists being restored to the state of who they were before their corruption. Norman Osborn becomes the final threat, manipulating the group and ultimately killing Aunt May, which becomes the emotional turning point for Holland's Peter. The finale sees Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield join Holland's Peter in battle, symbolically uniting all three live-action Spider-Man legacies on screen. When the villains are cured and return to their original universes, their fate is altered. They no longer return as monsters destined to die, but as rehabilitated versions of themselves. This multiverse convergence closes the arc of decades of Spider-Man cinema, transforming characters who previously represented tragedy and loss into a shared moment of redemption. Across 20 years of films, these villains weren't just obstacles, they were defining forces in Peter Parker's journey. They tested every version of him, pushed him to evolve, and left a lasting impact that reshaped what Spider-Man stands for. And when their worlds finally connected, these characters didn't return as symbols of failure, but as stories given a second chance.